Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got Matt Walsh fumbling his Joe Rogan appearance. What happened? I made one episode. I'm like, it's going strong. They're talking about the movie. They're talking about race hustlers. They're talking about Obama being the great divider. I'm like, this episode is just going to be filled with race relation type stuff, woke culture war type stuff, and obviously election stuff. I'm like, that's all it's going to be. It's Matt Walsh. Let's go. And then he gets sucked into a moon landing conversation. Oh, you got to watch out, Joe. You're on JRE. It's like quicksand. You got to watch. He brings up anything about the moon. You say, hey, what about Trump? This is conspiracy jujitsu, sir. This is a jujitsu match when you're on Joe Rogan. Okay? You got to be careful. I'm going to play a clip for you right now of their little discussion, by of which I mean almost the whole episode. Let's just get into it.
We're hiding the fact that God is real, and somehow there's some mass conspiracy that all these world governments and every person that ever was involved in the space agencies, they've all hid from us.
Yeah, and the moon landing. You're not a you believe in the moon landing, right?
I used to believe in the moon landing.
You don't anymore?
I had a joke in my act about it, that before COVID, I would have told you vaccine is the most important invention in human history, and after COVID, I'm like, I don't think we went to the moon.
Yeah, I know that was in your, but
Yeah.
you actually think that?
I think there is a less than zero possibility that we did not go to the moon.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Why do you think we went to the moon?
Because it's exactly what you just said about, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main thing is what you just said about the Earth, the vastness of the conspiracy that would be required to fake that. It's so vast that it's a lot more incredible to believe that we faked it than to believe that we just went. And going to the moon, it's a massive achievement, but I think the greatest human achievement of all time. But even so, to fake it would be even more massive, because not only would you need all of these space agencies and all the different whatever people in American institutions to be colluding, but you would also need foreign governments, including adversarial foreign governments, who at this point certainly would know we faked it, and for some reason haven't blown the lid on it. So they're letting us like take this achievement that they know. Like, why haven't the Russians come out and said
all those things you're saying are true?
Right.
I don't argue with any of the things you're saying. But one of the things that I think you have to consider is, if it's not possible for human beings to safely go through the Van Allen radiation belts and out into deep space without much protection and face the temperatures that are on the surface of the moon, which get up to 250 degrees and 250 degrees below zero in the shadows. There's no environment there. It's hostile beyond belief. Micrometeorites are flying into the moon all the time. They're flying through space all the time. We've never had a single biological organism go out into deep space, past the Van Allen radiation belts, and then come back to Earth and come back alive, except human beings during the Apollo missions. Every single space station mission, every single space shuttle mission, all of them are inside 350 miles from the Earth's surface. The only time human beings have ever been past that and through the Van Allen radiation belts was the Apollo missions. And we were the only humans that were ever able to do that. The Russians never figured out how to do it. No one else figured out how to do it but the Apollo astronauts. And we did it 7 times, 6 successfully, from 1969 to 1972. If you said to me, do you think that they could fake the moon landing today? I would say no. I would say no. People are going to be able to track it. It's very easy. They have satellites. They're going to know everything. But in 1969, the technology was so crude that when they first showed the Apollo 11 landing, they didn't even show a direct feed to the networks. So like if you're on CBS News, you don't get a direct feed. What you do is you point a camera at a projection screen. So that's why the film looks so The camera is pointed to a projection screen where you see the astronauts jumping around on the moon. And you see this weird, grainy, third-generation image, right? And we did it, and we have never done it since. And we've always said we're going to do it, and no one's ever even come close. No one's ever even gone into deep space since 1972.
We also haven't been trying.
We haven't been trying. But we always talk about going back, including Herbert Walker Bush talked about going back, George W. talked about going back. They all talk about going back, but nobody ever gets anywhere.
Well, I think that's because we lost the spirit and hunger for discovery.
We didn't just lose that. We lost all the technology from the Saturn V rocket. They don't even have that anymore. In fact, they don't even have the original film They erased all the original footage of the Apollo missions. So you just have copies of everything.
You could develop the technology again. You can do all that.
Sure, you could.
If
you can get through the Van Allen radiation belts into deep space with human beings and have them safely come back.
But I think what you're describing to me, all that does is highlight how incredible the achievement was.
If they did it. Right, if they did it.
But I don't, well, here's the main point. There's no evidence, because saying that it was a hoax is an assertion of it's not you're not just denying an event, you're asserting a whole other event that you say happened instead. And there is evidence that we went to the moon. Now someone who's a skeptic might say it's not enough evidence or it's not good evidence. There's like evidence. There's eyewitness. There's people that went and came back and told us. There's footage. There's a lot. Okay. There is evidence.
Okay.
But there's no evidence of the hoax. Like, no one has come and said, here's my affirmative evidence that this hoax happened. It's never happened, right, as far as I'm aware. No one's ever provided that evidence.
I see what you're trying to say. The evidence that they went to the moon, there's a bunch, right? There's moon rocks. That's one. There's lunar reflectors that they placed on the moon. That's another. And there's a couple problems with those. First of all, the Soviets put laser reflectors on the moon as well. And also the moon itself, in many places where you shine lasers on it, it bounces back by itself. The reflective quality of the moon, the reason why the moon is so bright and white in the sky when the sun hits it, there's a certain amount of, you get a certain amount of bounce back off of different things with lasers. There's some photographs that are interesting. What was it? Was the India? What was the one where they got the most high resolution photos of the lander?
I'm looking at it, Wikipedia right now, of all third-party evidence of the Apollo mission.
One of the things that's interesting is they gave a moon rock to, was it a prime minister of Holland? Is that what it was? Which one was the moon rock they gave that turned out to be petrified wood? So the Apollo astronauts gave a moon rock to some foreign dignitary, and it turned out to be a piece of petrified wood. They do have samples of moon rocks that came from the moon, but we also have those on Earth. And in fact, Wernher von Braun in 1968, I believe, went to Antarctica. There's all these photographs of him in Antarctica. Antarctica is a great place to take moon rocks because Antarctica is just this gigantic sheet of white, and you can spot the meteorites in the ground. So this is the photo. And this is from what? What is this from? What is the... So this is an Indian Space Research Organization's, I don't know how to say that word, Chandrayaan-2 orbiter captured images of NASA's Apollo 11 and 12 landing sites and lunar modules from 100-kilometer altitude. Apollo 12 image astronaut boots tracks are still even visible. Due to the recent interest in another post I shared, decided to download to view the raw imagery. So that looks like there's some kind of thing on the moon.
It's pretty good evidence.
It is evidence that something's on the moon. It's not evidence that human beings went to the moon. See, we have things that are on the moon. We have things on Mars right now.
Well,
we had things that were, we'd shot things into space for sure.
Yeah, but it's evidence. It's not proof in and of itself, but it is evidence.
Listen, I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. What I'm saying is the subject is complex. And it's not even a little complex. It's really complex. There's a documentary called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. This guy, Bart Sibrel, he's been obsessed. He was a guest on the show, too. Been obsessed about this his whole life and absolutely believes that we never went to the moon. And there's enough that you go, okay, if he's right about any of these things, it's weird. One of the things was some of the photographs of the moon, they ran through one of those AI detectors that can tell you whether or not something's false or artificially generated. And it showed different images from, I think it was a Chinese satellite of the moon. They said this is legitimate. But then it got to these Apollo images, and they said these have been doctored. This AI this AI program that
all
they
the
ran,
images or a few of them?
A few of them.
But then other ones were found to be authentic.
I don't think so. I think they only ran a few images through. See if you can find those, Jamie. Find what they did. Again, this is not saying that we didn't go to the moon. It could be, and this was a fact with the Gemini 15 program, where Michael Collins, there was a photograph of Michael Collins that they took in one of his training exercises, where he had those packs that they put on where they can move around while they're doing moon walks, or not moon walks, space walks outside of where they're connected by a tether. And he was like in this harness and manipulating this device. And what they had done is taken a photograph of him training, and then someone, probably some overzealous PR person, had taken that photograph and then blacked out the background and tried to pass it off as a really clear photograph of him out there on a spacewalk, which is probably very difficult to get, right? You'd have to have another person at the camera, frame it right. They had this photo. They're like, look, he did it. Let's just pass this off as the real thing, which is, you're also talking about the Nixon administration where they were just full of shit constantly.
If you remember, this is where he tried to
Yes.
claim it was from, which is a Russian video. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So there's different video where they ran it through and they said it was real. And was it a Chinese program? But when they ran the American ones, the American images, they said that they were doctored. Again, it doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon. But it does mean, okay, there's that. That's weird. Have you ever seen the Apollo 11 post-flight press conference?
Yeah.
It looks like a hostage video. It looks like a bunch of guys who don't want to be there. They look real fucking nervous, and they look real deceptive. If you watch that video, it's weird.
Well, but I think that's the temperament it requires to do something like that.
Could be.
It's basically, it's almost suicidal to go to the moon.
Right.
And so you have to be like barely even a human psychologically to do it. So that to me is just like, and they just went through this whole experience, but who knows what that does to the human psyche. To even just like be in the vastness of space, even on the space station, I feel like that would change me as a person,
But it
not
does.
necessarily for the best.
Well, there's actually like a psychological condition that they talk about. This sort of understanding that we're all connected. That it's like akin to a religious experience that many astronauts get when they go up to the space station and look down at the Earth and go, "Oh my God, what are we doing? Like we're all together in this thing, and we're so alone in the universe." And for us to be fighting over these trivial differences and these stupid lines in the dirt that we draw, when we are like just clinging to this ball in the middle of everything.
So then what would you say, or someone who is a full-on believer,
Not a full-on believer.
someone who is a full-on believer in the moon hoax, what would they say to my other point that there is evidence we went to the moon? You can try to nitpick the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
There is zero evidence of a hoax because that's a whole other event that would have had to have happened. There is no evidence at all, not one sliver of evidence ever of that hoax having ever happened.
And that's what you're seeing right there, folks. You're seeing a man who went right into Joe Rogan's trap. You got to remember, Joe Rogan is a black belt in jiu-jitsu taught by Eddie Bravo. He looked at Matt Walsh and he gave him his arm. He said, oh no, I don't even know if I believe in it. And Matt Walsh was like, oh, I gotcha. Oh, moon landing's real. And Joe was like, yeah, there we go. Shh. Into the deep waters, big guy. Come on. Yes, Jamie pulling up things. Jamie doesn't even like to pull up conspiracy stuff. Jamie's like, no problem. I got it right here. Oh my gosh. Look at him. He's not ready for that conversation. He was talking about for the moon landing. He's saying we lost the spirit of discovery. You think that's going to work against Joe Rogan talking about the moon landing? It's an election year, Matt. We got Trump versus Kamala. We need you on Joe Rogan's podcast saying good things about Trump, calling out Kamala Harris. That's what we need here, buddy. It's an election year. You're talking about the moon landing. You're Matt Walsh. What are you doing? You're not ready for this. You leave this to Eddie Bravo. You leave this to Sam Tripoli. You leave this to Brian Callen even. Brendan Schaub even. You leave it to someone else, okay, buddy? You're the politics guy. You crazy person? Oh my gosh. Look at him. He doesn't even know what to say. Oh, there's evidence. You're not ready for a Joe Rogan debate? Shame on Matt Walsh. But also, shame on Joe Rogan for actually doing this to Matt Walsh. He knew what he was doing. He knows who Matt Walsh is. You know what I mean? That's like a black belt looking at a white belt and being like, yeah, you want to roll? You want to roll around? Come on. Come here, big guy. Yeah. What are you doing? You're snapping his arm. It's not cool. Look at this stuff now. Now Matt Walsh is doing this. Look, did we lose Matt Walsh now? He's in a flannel in a hotel room making more moon landing videos. Whoa. It's an election year, bro. We're like, what, 49 days away? Are you crazy? Oh, my gosh. Well, let's hear a little bit what he has to say. Here, let's go.
The moon landing hoax is an event, right? If it happened, it's an event. It is a thing that happened. It's not simply the absence of an event. So if you deny that the moon landing happened, you're not simply denying that a thing happened. You are asserting some other thing that you say happened instead of the thing that we all think happened. Staging the moon landing and all of that, right? That would have been, there was a thing that they did. And yet, and this to me, I think is really kind of decisive in this argument. None of the skeptics have ever presented a single shred of evidence of that event occurring. Okay, so to be very clear about this, to look at the evidence of the moon landing and to pick it apart and say, well, this evidence isn't compelling enough, that is not evidence of the hoax. That is, at best, you are succeeding in calling into question some of the evidence of this other event, which I don't think.
Tim Walsh is about to put tampons in the men's washrooms of the White House. If we don't stop playing games like this, Matt, you're making moon landing videos after being on Joe Rogan and talking about the moon. We lost Matt Walsh, guys. That's it. We're done now. He's going to get dropped from Daily Wire. He's going to start smoking blunts, and he's going to be a debunker. It's not going to work. He's going to become a flat earther. He's going to have a podcast with Eddie Bravo. We lost him. That's it. We're done now. He's going to be friends with Owen Benjamin. That's it. We're done now. Oh, man. He's reading off of something. Like, come on, man. What are you doing here? Now, there was a reason that he actually did engage in this conversation, which he reveals here. Listen quickly.
And this has been one of my professional ambitions now for probably a decade, is to go on Joe Rogan's show and talk about something like that. Talk about aliens, talk about moon landing, something in that vein. The first time I did the show, we didn't get into any of that kind of stuff. And so I was actually happy. I'm like, yes, this is my great ambition, is to talk about this kind of thing on this show. So it was great.
No, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. And let me tell you something. He didn't win the debate either. Now, the only bright side of that whole thing, he didn't win because he's not ready. Joe's been doing this for years. But here's the good part of this video. We got Joe back. Joe doesn't believe in the moon landing anymore. We got him back, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that's so nice. Now we can probably get Eddie Bravo on the podcast again. They'll have a great time. There we go. That's what we needed. Yeah, Joe's coming back. He's coming back, guys. He used to not believe in it. And then just as the podcast, because I know all the conspiracy. I know all the theories that we have. Okay? I got the tinfoil Speedo, and right as the podcast started taking off into a new stratosphere, he was like, I believe in the moon landing. He became just really firm about it. Argued with Eddie Bravo about it, everything like that. Now it's 2024, and he's back. There we go. That's the only good thing out of this. But God, Matt just so many things Matt could have talked about. Kamala Harris. Look, here's Matt talking about Kamala Harris in the interview she did and how terrible it was.
Okay, so let's review all the problems with this, or at least some of the major ones. First of all, Dana Bash gives her the question with multiple choice answers. So she asks her about the flip-flopping and then feeds her a couple of possible answers that she might give. And one of them is, is it just that you've learned more and your policy, as you've grown and learned, you've changed your opinion. And that's about as good an excuse for flip-flopping as you're going to get. And so Kamala Harris could have said, well, it's exactly that. You're 100% right. That's it. Listen, I've learned, I've grown, as I've gotten more information, I've changed, just like anyone. I've changed my view as I've gotten more information. She could have said that, but she doesn't. Instead, Kamala doesn't take the hint, does not accept the gift that's been given to her, and she goes off on a ramble about how her values haven't changed. She won't deny that her policies have changed. She says her values haven't. So, then if your values haven't, then why have your policies changed? Are you admitting to being an opportunist and a hypocrite? Isn't it better? It's one thing if your policies have changed in the same direction, right? Maybe you were liberal and they become more liberal. Well, then you can say, well, my values haven't changed. But when the policies flip, when it's the opposite of what it was before, and yet your values are exactly the same, well, all that tells us what you're admitting is that either before or now, you're full of it. You're being an opportunist. You're being a hypocrite.
Wouldn't that have been great to hear on JRE? Wouldn't that have been great, guys? We could have heard him say that to Joe. You know, instead of Joe being like, she really nailed that speech. She said, one time she said she nailed it. She said, say it to my face. She nailed it. She really nailed it. She nailed that debate. We could have got into that conversation and Matt Walsh would have dominated Joe in that conversation. Because Joe's having that conversation with a bunch of comedians who are just like, yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me here, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. No, yes. What do you think? I think that too. That's what he's had for a long time. You know what I mean? And you can't fault him. One of the most famous people in the world. You know, who wouldn't be like that? I wouldn't be like that. But I could see it. I can understand 100%. But if Matt Walsh brought that up, oh, then the tables would have turned. He would have had Joe in a leg lock. He would have been like, Joe would have had to tap. Would have had to throw that opinion of Kamala out the window of killing it and being real good in certain circumstances. Oh, but no, Matt, we couldn't have that from you. You had to have a moon landing conversation. Look at him, just stuck there like this. Just can't believe what he's doing. Joe, you don't really. And Joe's just dominating you. It's Joe Rogan. Look at him. High as all get out. He doesn't care. He's like, I have this conversation all day. Oh, man. But all in all, it was a very thrilling conversation. I don't do timestamps anymore, but for this I will because it was so dumb. From 48 minutes all the way to 1 hour and 48 minutes, they talk about the moon landing. The podcast is only 2 hours and 37 minutes and 22 seconds. You fumbled it, Matt. You fumbled it. I don't care what anybody says. Oh, he's going to talk about what he wants to talk about. Oh, no. I see it now. I can see you guys now. And you're save it. Okay? Save it. It's an election year. We're very close. What's going on here, man? Anyways, guys, I just found that very interesting that he got pulled into that conversation. Couldn't believe it myself. You know, I know there's some people out there. I saw him in the comments. They couldn't believe it either. He did his best. And he did his best. That's the thing. You want to go toe-to-toe with Joe Rogan about something like the moon landing? You try your best. You try your best. Because he can go either way. I've seen him go at Eddie Bravo saying that the moon landing is completely real. And to think anything less is ridiculous. And then you see him now and he's just like, yeah, no, I can give you all the proof of why it's not. The guy's an expert at this. This is his show. Can't walk in that dojo and, you know what I mean? Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Other than that, I'm out.